All right, so I just wanted to talk about something that's coming up and something that I think is going to be pretty big for Gorilla Technology. And Gorilla is a company that I've been supporting for a very long time, more than a year now, and or no, it's probably around 6 months now. And I made a video on it a couple of weeks ago about how it is a great company to invest for the short term and the long term, and I still stand by that. And ever since I made that video, it has pretty much doubled. So I do hope that a couple of you were able to invest. And if you weren't, I think it is still a great time to invest now, even though it has been up a lot. And this is one of the biggest reasons is um, Gorilla doesn't generally have a lot of news. It is still a very low market cap stock. It is around 500 million. And when I invested, it was even less, or probably I think around 40 million. And since it's such a small market cap, it doesn't really get any news. There's barely any news, but the stock is still going up because they have very solid growing financials. They are in a they're a growing industry. They're an AI stock, and they have a promising future. But even with that, they don't really get much coverage. So any little bit of news that the stock gets usually does lead to big moves. It is a very volatile stock to begin with. So any piece of news will move the stock a ton. From the time period that I was invested, I know that a little bit of bad news will move the stock down a lot, and even a little bit of good news is going to move it up 10-20% at least. And that's what that's what I'm making a video on now, is this good news that is coming Tuesday. It'll be Tuesday after the market. And the good news is that Gorilla is hosting another, and I say another because they have done this before, investor webinar. And this is great news for the company because, and I'll explain why it has been great. The first one that they did, which they held, I think in December, was also great news for the company because since it's such a small stock and there isn't really much coverage on it, these investor webinars are great for, the CEO comes on, the CFO comes on, and they kind of talk a little about what their business really does, because a lot of the people don't know. And that's a great opportunity for investors to learn, and for more investors to be generally bullish on the outlook of the company. So again, this is on February 18th, coming up on Tuesday after the market closes, or I think around 4:15, 4:30. And this is a webinar. And in my opinion, and I'll back this up in a second with what happened after the first webinar that they held in December, but in my opinion, the stock is going to see huge moves after this, because again, they have been on the rise as of recently, but they're still very, very undervalued in my opinion. They only, I think, have a 9 price to earnings ratio that is very solid. They're very undervalued. They're a growing company. I don't think many people know. So again, this is important because look, if you scroll down here, this is what their events are now. You see the 18th here, but if you scroll down, you'll see that on December 12th at the same exact time, they had the same thing, an investor webinar. And, you learn at the company, Q&A, whatever. And if we go to the chart here, December 12th, see the current price. December 12th, they're at $7.69. And that was before the webinar, and then the webinar was on the 12th, and then you see after the webinar, you see the 13th, you see a rise to $8, and then after that, you see the steady rise, and it kept rising, and honestly, it ended up at $24. So you see this webinar, it was at $7.69, it went to $24. That is more than 3 times the price. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to triple again. That is because of the webinar, but also I think because of just they had very solid financials, and they were way, way more undervalued than they are now. They had probably a 3 price to earnings. So I do not think they're going to triple in price again, but I do think they're going to see big rise. I think you could definitely see a rise to $40. I think right now you see it rose. It was at 12 before. It had a little bit of a pullback from its 24 in early January, and a little bit of a correction. And I know that a lot of people, I remember I was thinking not to panic during this time, because I knew that these gains from $7 or whatever, even $5, all the way to 24 was just a ton. So it's understandable why the stock would pull back, but I knew that that was not it. And it wasn't it. And it went from 12 all the way to 30. It pulled back a little bit more. But again, I don't think this is going to keep sinking. I think that this webinar on the 18th could send this gorilla all the way up to 40. And I think for the long term, it has the chance to get all the way to 100. And I think it could even go beyond that, because this is a growing stock that is still very, very undervalued. And I think this webinar is a great opportunity for investors to learn why Gorilla could be in their future plans in terms of investing. So keep an eye out on aftermarket, after hours, on the 18th. I know I will. And on the 19th, especially, keep an eye out. I'm not really sure what's going to happen Tuesday. Could go down a little more, could kind of stay neutral, could go up a little to 30. But I think definitely for Wednesday, the 19th, I would keep a major eye out on what Grill's going to do. And if I predict that it will soar. But if it does go down a little more, then so be it. But most likely with these, and you see this as a trend for these new companies, that these webinars only really help them, because the CEO, CFO get a chance to really explain why they should invest, which a lot of investors aren't aware of. So just keep an eye out for the 19th. That'll be a huge day for Gorilla. Again, very little news regarding Gorilla, but this is a huge potential to be a huge piece of news and really catalyze the stock for the future.